July in Oklahoma, where heat doesn't just rise. It presses down like a palm against your chest until breathing feels like work. 1,200 acres of wheat shimmer gold beneath a sky gone white with sun. But the fields aren't the story. Not yet. The story is the equipment shed. Rusted metal, shadows, and inside, 3 machines that should be running but aren't. A woman stands in the doorway. 26. Blonde hair dark with sweat. Her wedding ring still on, but her husband's truck already gone. Dust still settling on the county road. She's staring at a John Deere with hydraulic fluid pooling beneath it like blood. At a combine with a frozen heart. At a Ford that hasn't turned over in 8 months, 3 broken beasts. $18,000 owed to a bank that's already sharpening its teeth. 63 days until foreclosure. And her. Just her. The professionals say it'll cost $5,000 to fix what's broken. She's got $340 and a dead man's notebook. The math doesn't work. But mathematics never saved a farm. July came to Oklahoma like a furnace door swinging open. Heat so thick you could chew it. The kind that made asphalt soft and turned wheat fields into an ocean of gold that shimmered and lied about water that wasn't there. Rebecca Clark Taylor stood on the porch of the farmhouse, watching her husband load the last of his belongings into the bed of his Chevy pickup. 26 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, because anything else felt like trying in a moment that had already failed. Her hands gripped the porch railing, white knuckles. The wood was hot enough to burn, but she held on anyway. Christopher didn't look back at her as he worked. 29, and done with all of it. Done with the farm. Done with the debt. Done with her. His shoulders tight under his shirt as he threw a duffel bag onto the pile. The screen door hung crooked on one hinge. Had been that way since March. Another thing that needed fixing. Another thing that would have to wait, because everything was waiting now. Her father had been dead 6 months. The farm was drowning in debt. 3 tractors sat broken in the equipment shed, like beached whales. And her husband was leaving, Sybil as that. Christopher slammed the tailgate shut. The sound cracked across the yard like a rifle shot. He turned then, looked at her for the first time all morning. His face was set, mouth a hard line. Eyes already somewhere else, the words came out flat. Your father's dream died with him. I won't die with it too. Rebecca's throat tightened. She wanted to say something. Wanted to scream or beg or tell him he was wrong. But her voice had gone somewhere she couldn't reach it. Christopher walked to the driver's side, opened the door, paused with one boot on the running board. I got a job lined up in Tulsa, oil fields, real money. You should sell this place while you still can. Then he was in the truck. Engine turning over, dust kicking up from the tires. Rebecca watched him drive down the long dirt road that led to the county highway. Watched until the truck was just a speck. Then nothing. Just the red dust hanging in the air. Settling slowly back to earth. The silence after was worse than the leaving. No, that wasn't true. The silence was just different, because the farmhouse had always been full of sound. Her father Kenneth working in the shop, the radio playing country music, tractors running. Life happening. Now there was just wind, and the creak of that broken screen door. And somewhere in the distance a crow calling to nothing. Rebecca walked down the porch steps. Her boots hit the packed dirt of the yard. Each step felt deliberate, like she was choosing to keep moving when stopping would have been easier. Eva watched your whole life drive away in a cloud of red dust. She had now. The equipment shed sat 50 yards from the house. Big metal building that her grandfather had put up in 1952. Same year, he bought the Ford 8N tractor that still sat inside. 27 years of Oklahoma weather had turned the shed's paint to memory. Rust blooming at every seam. Rebecca pulled the heavy door open. The hinges screamed. Inside was darkness and the smell of diesel and old grease and metal that had been sitting too long. She stood in the doorway, letting her eyes adjust. 3 machines. 3 problems. 3 reasons Christopher had finally given up. The John Deere 4430 sat closest to the door. Green and yellow paint dulled by years of fieldwork. Diesel engine that could pull a 5-bottom plow through hard-pan soil without complaining. Except it wasn't pulling anything now. Hydraulic fluid pooled beneath it on the concrete floor. Dark red. Almost black. The puddle had been growing for 2 weeks. Started as a drip, then a trickle. Now a steady leak that bled the tractor's lifeblood onto the ground. Rebecca crouched down, touched the fluid with her fingertips. Slick, warm from the trapped heat inside the shed. The selective control valve housing. Had to be. Same problem her father had fixed back in 1977. She'd been 14, watched him drain the system and pull the whole assembly apart. Watched him replace a $2 O-ring and put it all back together. Made it look easy. Which meant it probably wasn't. She stood, moved to the second machine, the Massey Ferguson 760 combine. Hulking red beast that could cut and thresh and separate 8 acres of wheat in an hour when it was running right. When it was running at all, Rebecca climbed up onto the platform, opened the side panel. The thresher cylinder sat frozen, bearing seized solid. She tried to turn it by hand. Nothing. Might as well have been trying to move a mountain. The bearing had thrown itself during last year's harvest. Her father had been planning to fix it over the winter. Then January came, and Kenneth Clark had a heart attack in this very shed, with a wrench still in his hand, and the planning stopped mattering. Rebecca closed the panel, climbed back down. Her hands were already dirty, grease and dust mixing with sweat. The third machine sat in the back corner. Ford 8N. 1952 model. Faded blue paint and rust and a profile that looked almost cheerful compared to the modern equipment. Her grandfather had bought it used in 1968 for $800. Kenneth had kept it running ever since. Used it for lighter work, hauling, bush hogging, running the post hole digger. Except it hadn't run in 8 months. Rebecca turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. The electrical system was completely dead. Magneto, wiring harness, maybe the whole charging system. Could be anything. Could be everything. She let her head rest against the steering wheel. These weren't just tractors. They were the last things her father's hands had touched before he died. The last projects he'd meant to finish. The last machines he'd believed in, and now they were her problem. All of them. Professional repair would cost $5,200. She'd called 3 shops, got 3 quotes. All of them the same. All of them impossible, because Rebecca had $340 in her checking account. Her half of what was left, after paying the feed bill, and the electric, and the property tax that had come due in June. Christopher had taken his half when he left. Fair was fair, even when fair felt like drowning. She walked back outside. The July sun hit her like a hammer, heat waves rising off the metal roof of the shed. The sky overhead was white-blue, cloudless, merciless. 1,200 acres stretched out around her in every direction. Wheat fields, pasture, creek-bottom land that flooded every spring. Earth that had been in the Clark family since 1948, when her grandfather came home from the war and bought it for $45 an acre. Took him 20 years to pay it off. Now it was hers. Hers and the bank's. Because Kenneth had taken out an $18,000 operating loan 3 years ago. New well pump. Fence repairs. Seed for 2 seasons when the drought had eaten the previous year's crop. The loan sat at First County Bank with an interest rate that had seemed reasonable at the time. Payment due September 15th, every year. Same as harvest time, same as when the wheat money came in. Except this year the wheat was standing ready in 800 acres of field. And there was no way to cut it. Not without the combine. Not without the tractors to haul it to the elevator. Not without equipment that ran. Rebecca walked back to the house. Up the porch steps. Through the screen door that needed fixing. Into the kitchen where the table was covered in papers. Bills mostly. The electric company. The phone company. The farm supply store in Weatherford, where her father had bought parts for 40 years on credit that now needed settling. She sat down. Pulled the calculator close. Started adding numbers she already knew. Income. $480 a month from her part-time job at the county library. $60 a month from selling eggs to the neighbors. Maybe another $40 if she sold the old furniture in the barn. Expenses. $85 for electric. $22 for phone. $120 for gas for the truck. $150 for food if she was careful. $40 more for everything else that came up. Total left over. $123. To pay off $18,000 that would take. She did the math. 146 months. 12 years. The bank wouldn't wait 12 years. The bank wouldn't wait 12 weeks. Rebecca pushed the calculator away. Stood up. Walked to the window that looked out over the south pasture. Her reflection stared back at her. Thin face, tired eyes, blonde hair that needed washing. 26 years old and looking 40. The only way to pay the loan was to bring in the wheat harvest. Sell the grain. Pay the bank. Keep the farm. Simple plan, impossible execution, because you can't harvest wheat without a combine that works. Can't haul grain without tractors that run. Can't do any of it when the machines are dead, and you have $340 and no husband and no help and no idea how to fix what's broken. Except her father had fixed machines, had fixed the same machines, had written down every repair in a spiral notebook that sat in the workshop right now gathering dust. Rebecca turned from the window, walked through the house, out the back door, across the yard to the workshop, smaller building than the equipment shed, wood frame, concrete floor, pegboard walls covered in tools that hung in precise rows, everything in its place, everything labeled. Kenneth Clark had believed in order, had believed that chaos killed farms faster than drought or debt or bad luck. The big red toolbox sat against the far wall. Craftsman, 5 feet tall, drawers on ball-bearing slides, every socket, every wrench, every specialty tool Kenneth had accumulated over 4 decades of keeping equipment running. Rebecca opened the top drawer. Ball-peen hammers, rubber mallets, dead-blow hammers for hitting things that shouldn't spark. Second drawer, combination wrenches, metric and standard, organized by size. Third drawer, sockets, extensions, ratchets, universal joints. She closed the drawers, looked at the shelf above the toolbox. VFS manuals lined up like books in a library. John Deere, Massey Ferguson, Ford, International Harvester. Every machine Kenneth had ever owned had a manual. Every manual had pages soft as fabric from being opened and read and referenced 1,000 times. The spiral notebook sat at the end of the shelf. Rebecca pulled it down. The cover was grease-stained, warped from humidity. The wire spiral bent from being stuffed in pockets and dropped on shop floors and carried everywhere Kenneth went. She opened it. The first page was dated June 1949. Written in pencil. Kenneth's blocky handwriting, careful and deliberate. Farmall H replaced clutch disc. 1250 parts, 6 hours labor. Saved $45 mechanic fee. Page after page, year after year. Every repair, every oil change, every belt replacement. Every bearing that wore out and got swapped for a new one. 30 years of mechanical memory written in graphite and ink. And sometimes blood when Kenneth cut his hands and didn't bother washing them before writing. Rebecca flipped forward. Found the section on the John Deere 4430. There. June 1977. Hydraulic leak from SCV housing. Dripping 2 quarts. Drained system 7.5 gal. Removed valve body. 12 bolts 9/16 wrench. Found O-ring cracked and hard. Replaced with part R26448. Bought 3 for 97 cents at Enid dealer. Reassembled. Torqued to spec. 25 fetal bees. Refilled with fresh hydraulic fluid. No more leak. Saved $100 mechanic fee. 8 hours total labor. Rebecca read it 3 times. Her father had fixed this, the exact same problem, 2 years ago, which meant she could fix it. Maybe, probably not. But maybe. She looked at the toolbox, at the manuals, at the notebook in her hands. Inside the front cover was a note she'd never seen before. Written in Kenneth's hand. Recent ink. The paper still white instead of yellowed. The machines will test you harder than I ever could. But I taught you to listen. Trust what you know. Dad, Rebecca's eyes burned. She blinked hard. Put the notebook down on the workbench. Not now. Crying could wait. Crying was a luxury for people who had time. She didn't have time. She had a hydraulic system to fix, a combine bearing to replace, an electrical system to resurrect, a wheat field to harvest, a loan to pay, a farm to save. And no one was coming to help her. No one was coming at all. The realization settled over her like weight, heavy and final. Which meant if this was going to get done, it was going to get done by her. Just her, alone. The drive to Weatherford took 30 minutes. Rebecca's truck burned oil, left a blue haze behind it on the county road. The radio didn't work. The air conditioning was a memory. She drove with the windows down and the hot wind whipping through the cab. First County Bank sat on Main Street between the hardware store and the Rexall drugstore. Brick building. 2 stories. Built in 1923 and looking like it. Rebecca parked, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Still looked tired, still looked desperate. Nothing to be done about it. She walked inside. The bank was cold. Air conditioning running full blast. The temperature change after the heat outside made her skin prickle. Jonathan Harris's office was in the back. Glass door. Name stenciled in gold letters. 3rd-generation banker. His grandfather had opened this branch. His father had run it for 30 years. Now Jonathan sat behind the desk and made decisions about who got money and who didn't. Rebecca knocked. Harris looked up, 58 years old, silver hair, reading glasses, white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His face did something complicated. Surprise, then sympathy, then something harder to read. Rebecca, come in. She sat in the chair across from his desk. The leather was cold against her legs. Harris took off his glasses, folded them, set them down carefully. I heard about Christopher. I'm sorry. Rebecca's jaw tightened. I'm here about the loan, of course. Harris pulled a folder from his desk drawer, opened it. Pages of forms and numbers and signatures. September 15th, 18,000. Plus interest brings it to 19,200. I know, Rebecca. Harris leaned forward. His voice went soft. The tone people used when they were about to deliver bad news and wanted you to think they felt bad about it. With your equipment situation, with Christopher gone, how do you plan to make the payment? I'll bring in the harvest. Harris's eyebrows went up. The wheat's ready now. You have maybe 3 weeks before you start losing quality. How are you going to cut 800 acres with a combine that doesn't run? I'll fix it. Silence. Harris studied her face, looking for something. Signs of delusion, maybe. Signs of hope that wasn't rooted in reality. Finally, he sighed, pulled another folder from his drawer. This one thicker, newer. There's a company out of Tulsa. Consolidated Ag Partners. They're buying up family farms, assembling larger parcels. Corporate agriculture. They've already purchased the Morrison place and the Wilson spread. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Jake Wilson sold? 3 weeks ago. $420 an acre. Harris slid a paper across the desk. They've authorized me to make you the same offer. 1,200 acres at $420. That's $504,000. After we settle your loan, you'd walk away with $486,000. The number sat between them like something alive. $486,000. Enough to start over. Go to college, move to the city, buy a house that didn't leak when it rained. Get a job that paid more than minimum wage. Leave the farm behind. Leave her father's memory behind. Leave everything behind. Rebecca's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. I'm not selling. Harris blinked. Rebecca, be reasonable. You can't run this place alone. You can't fix equipment that needs professional repair. You can't bring in a harvest by yourself. I'll figure it out. How? The softness was gone from Harris's voice now. Just pragmatism. Just numbers. You have $340 in your account. Your equipment is dead. You have no crew, no capital. No way to make this work. Rebecca stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. The harvest will come in. The loan will be paid. Harris stood too. Came around the desk. His face was tired. Like he'd had this conversation before. Like he already knew how it ended. I've known your family my whole life. Your grandfather, your father, good people. But Kenneth held on too long. Tried to farm the old way in a world that's moved on. Don't make the same mistake. Rebecca's throat was tight. Her eyes burned. But she didn't look away. My father was the smartest man in this county. And I'm not selling his land. She turned. Walked to the door. Harris called after her. The payment's due in 63 days. After that we start foreclosure proceedings. I won't have a choice. Rebecca kept walking. Through the bank. Past the tellers. Out into the heat that felt like a physical blow after the air conditioning. She got in her truck. Sat there. Hands on the steering wheel. 63 days. 9 weeks. Not much time. Not nearly enough. The sun was setting when Rebecca walked into the workshop. Orange light slanting through the west-facing windows. Long shadows stretching across the concrete floor. She turned on the overhead fluorescent lights. They flickered. Buzzed. Finally caught and held. The John Deere 4430 sat in the equipment shed waiting. But the shed didn't have good light. Didn't have the tools. Didn't have Kenneth's notebook and manuals. And everything she'd need, which meant that the tractor had to come to the workshop. Rebecca spent an hour getting the John Deere started. The hydraulic system leaked, but it still had enough fluid to move. She drove it slowly across the yard, parked it inside the workshop, killed the engine. Then she stood looking at it. Green paint. Yellow accents. Diesel engine that displaced 404 cubic inches, 130 horsepower. Hydrostatic transmission. 3-point hitch that could lift 6,000 pounds when the hydraulics worked. Right now it couldn't lift anything. Rebecca opened Kenneth's notebook. Read the June 1977 entry again. Then again. Then one more time until she could see it in her head. 11:30 at night. The house was dark. The farm was silent except for crickets and the occasional bark of a dog from the neighbor's place, 2 miles away. Rebecca pulled on her father's old coveralls. Too big, she had to roll the sleeves and cuffs. But they were thick canvas that would protect her skin from sharp edges and hot metal. She pushed a rolling creeper under the tractor, lay down on it, slid underneath. The hydraulic fluid dripped onto her face. She wiped it away. Focused her flashlight on the selective control valve housing. 12 bolts. 9/16 wrench. She fit the wrench over the first bolt. Pulled. The bolt fought her. Rust and time and cross-threading had turned it into a battle. Rebecca braced her feet against the tractor's frame. Pulled harder. The bolt gave. Suddenly, she barked her knuckles against the housing. Blood mixed with hydraulic fluid. She ignored it. 11 more bolts. 2 hours later, all 12 bolts lay on a clean rag next to the tractor. Rebecca slid out from underneath, rolled to her feet. Her back ached. Her hands were already blistering, and she'd only started. She found a drain pan, positioned it under the tractor, opened the drain valve. Hydraulic fluid poured out, 7.5 gallons, dark red, almost black. The smell was acrid, chemical. It made her eyes water. When the flow stopped, she closed the valve, moved to the selective control valve housing. Getting it off was a 2-person job. Kenneth had always had someone helping. Rebecca was alone. She rigged a chain hoist from the rafters, positioned it carefully, attached the chain to the housing, started cranking. The housing weighed 68 pounds, awkward, unwieldy. She guided it as the chain lifted. Her arms shook with the effort. When it was clear of the tractor, she swung it over to the workbench, lowered it down, unhooked the chain midnight. Her whole body ached, and the hard part hadn't started yet. Rebecca took the housing apart, bolt by bolt, piece by piece, laying everything out in order just like Kenneth had taught her. First piece here, second piece next to it, third piece after that. Don't mix up the order. Don't lose track of what goes where. The machine has a memory. Respect it. Inside the housing was the selective control valve itself, and around the valve were the O-rings that sealed the system. Rebecca found the failed ring. Cracked, hard as plastic, completely useless. This tiny circle of rubber no bigger than a quarter. This was what had killed a 10-ton tractor. She held it up to the light, turned it in her fingers. 97 cents. That's what the notebook said. 3 O-rings for 97 cents. If she could find the right parts store. If they had the right part number. If everything went exactly right. Big ifs. Rebecca looked at the clock on the wall. 1:15 in the morning. She should sleep, should rest, should pace herself. Instead, she kept working, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling. And feeling meant acknowledging how scared she was. Better to keep moving. She cleaned every piece, degreaser and rags, and a wire brush for the hard-to-reach spots. Cleaned until everything gleamed under the fluorescent lights. By 2:30, everything was laid out. Ready for reassembly as soon as she had the new O-rings. Rebecca washed her hands at the utility sink. The water ran black, then brown, then finally clear. Her knuckles were raw, bleeding in 3 places. Her fingernails were packed with grease that wouldn't come out, no matter how hard she scrubbed. She walked back to the house, up the stairs, into her bedroom, fell onto the bed. Fully clothed Seep came like a hammer. Dawn broke at 5:47. Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through the window. Her body felt like it had been beaten, every muscle sore. Her hands throbbing, she forced herself up, showered, changed into clean clothes, made coffee that was too strong and toast that was too burnt. The parts store in Enid was 45 miles away. Kenneth's notebook said that's where he'd bought the O-rings in 1977. No guarantee they'd still have them. No guarantee they'd even be open this early. But it was the only lead she had. Rebecca got in her truck, drove east into the rising sun. The roads were empty this early. Just her and the farmers already out checking their fields. Enid was bigger than Weatherford. Had a Walmart, a Sonic, 3 different parts stores. The John Deere dealership sat on the north edge of town. Big lot. New tractors lined up gleaming in the sun. Price tags that would have made Kenneth weep. Inside the parts counter was manned by a kid who looked maybe 20. Grease under his fingernails. Name tag that, said Travis. Rebecca pulled out the notebook. Showed him the entry. I need part number R26448. O-rings for a selective control valve. 4430 model. Travis typed into his computer, frowned, Type more. That's a 1977 part number. System shows superseded. Rebecca's stomach clenched. Superseded to what? More typing. R31556. Same O-ring. Updated part number. We got 3 in stock. Relief hit her like a wave. How much? $29 for 3. She pulled 2 crumpled dollar bills from her pocket, slid them across the counter. Travis rang her up, put 3 small O-rings in a paper bag. Gave her 71 cents change. Rebecca walked back to her truck, holding the bag like it contained diamonds. $1.29. That's all it took to save a tractor. That's all it took to have hope. The drive back felt faster. The sun was higher now, the heat already building. Another day in Oklahoma that would hit triple digits. Rebecca pulled into the farmyard, parked, walked straight to the workshop. The John Deere waited, patient, mechanical, indifferent to whether she succeeded or failed. She opened the paper bag, took out the O-rings. They were soft, pliable, black rubber that felt alive in her hands. Climped opposite of the old ring that had been hard and cracked and dead. Rebecca fitted the new ring into its groove, checked it twice, then started reassembling the valve. Every piece went back in reverse order. Every bolt threaded in carefully. No cross-threading, no forcing, slow, deliberate, the way Kenneth had taught her. By noon, the valve was together. She used the chain hoist to lift it, guided it back into position on the tractor, threaded all 12 mounting bolts through, tightened them finger-tight first, then with the torque wrench, 25 foot-pounds. Exactly, not more, not less. The manual was specific. Too tight and you'd crack the housing. Too loose and it would leak. Kenneth's voice in her head. Quiet, patient, teaching her the way he'd taught her everything else. Measures twice, cut once, torque to spec, check your work. She filled the hydraulic reservoir with fresh fluid. 7.5 gallons, the same amount that had drained out. Then she sat in the tractor's cab, turned the key. The diesel engine turned over, coughed, settled into a rough idle that smoothed out after a few seconds. Rebecca's hand shook as she reached for the hydraulic control lever. This was the moment. Either it worked or it didn't. Either she'd done it right or she'd wasted 3 days and $1.29. She pulled the lever. The 3-point hitch at the back of the tractor rose. Smooth. Silent. No jerking. No grinding. She held it there. Counted to 10. Waiting for the hydraulic fluid to start dripping. No drip. She lowered the hitch. Raised it again. Still no leak. Rebecca climbed down. Walked around to the back, got on her hands and knees, looked underneath at the selective control valve housing. Dry, completely dry, no leak, no drip, no problem. She sat back, put her hands over her face, 1 machine down, 2 to go. Her body was already telling her this was impossible. Her hands were torn up. Her back ached. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Sleep was something that happened in 4-hour chunks when exhaustion finally won. And she'd only fixed the easiest repair. The combine bearing was going to be worse. The Ford's electrical system was going to be a nightmare. 63 days. No 60 days now. 3 days gone already. Could she do this? Could her body survive what was coming? Rebecca didn't know, but she also didn't have a choice, because selling meant giving up, meant admitting defeat, meant betraying everything Kenneth had built and believed in. And she wasn't ready to do that. Not yet, maybe not ever. She stood up. Walked to the workshop sink, washed the grease off her hands one more time. Outside, the sun beat down. The wheat fields waited. The combine sat broken. The Ford sat dead. And somewhere in Tulsa, Christopher was probably starting his new job, his new life. Already forgetting about the farm and the debt and the woman he'd left behind. Rebecca looked at her reflection in the window. Thin, tired, scared, but not broken. Not yet. She turned off the lights in the workshop, walked to the house, made herself eat something even though she wasn't hungry. Tomorrow she'd start on the combine. Tonight she had let herself feel one small victory. 1 machine saved for $1.29. 1 impossible thing done. Which meant maybe, just maybe. The other impossible things could be done too. The sun set over the wheat fields. Red sky, purple clouds. The kind of sunset that made Oklahoma worth the heat and the dust and the struggle. Rebecca sat on the porch, the broken screen door creaking in the breeze. Tomorrow would be hard. The day after harder. The whole summer stretching ahead full of pain and doubt and work that would test everything she had. But tonight she'd fixed a tractor. Just her. Alone. With her father's notebook and $1.29. And that was enough for now. That was enough. The Massey Ferguson 760 combine sat in the equipment shed like a sleeping dragon. Red paint faded to pink in places, rust blooming along the edges, 20 feet long, 8 feet wide. A cutting header that could swallow wheat in 12-foot swaths when it was working. When it worked at all, Rebecca stood in front of it. July heat making the metal shed into an oven, sweat already running down her back, and she hadn't even started yet. 3 weeks since she'd fixed the John Deere. 3 weeks of prep work, greasing fittings, changing oil, replacing belts, getting the tractor ready for harvest season. But harvest meant nothing without the combine. And the combine was the beast that had killed her optimism. She climbed up onto the platform, opened the side access panel. The thresher cylinder sat frozen inside, a drum covered in steel bars designed to beat wheat kernels free from the chaff. Supposed to spin at 800 RPM. Right now it wouldn't spin at all. Rebecca tried to turn it by hand. Nothing. Might as well have been trying to rotate the earth. The bearing. Had to be the bearing. Main shaft bearing that held the entire cylinder assembly. Seized solid from metal on metal. From running too hot too long before Kenneth realized something was wrong. She pulled out the service manual. Massey Ferguson 760. Copyright 1973. Pages yellowed. Grease-stained. Held together with duct tape. Section 8.4. Cylinder bearing replacement. Professional service recommended. Cylinder assembly weight. 340 pounds. Requires overhead hoist. Bearing puller. Hydraulic press. Specialized tools. Rebecca read the warnings. Read them again. Looked up at the cylinder. 340 pounds. She weighed 115 after losing weight she couldn't afford to lose. The math wasn't encouraging. But neither was anything else about her situation. She went to the workshop. Found Kenneth's chain hoist. Heavy duty. Rated for 1/2 ton. Her grandfather had used it to pull engines. Kenneth had used it to lift transmission assemblies. Rebecca was going to use it to keep a farm from dying. She dragged the hoist back to the shed. Climbed up into the combine's innards. Found the main beam that ran across the top of the thresher housing. Hooked the chain to the beam. Tested it. The metal groaned but held. Good enough. Had to be good enough. Because professional repair wasn't an option. Because calling a mechanic meant admitting she couldn't do this. Because the clock was ticking, and the wheat was ripening, and September 15th was getting closer every day. Rebecca started on the cylinder. 12 bolts held it in place. Inch and quarter sockets. The kind that required a 3-foot breaker bar to get any leverage. She fought each bolt. Rust and threadlock and time had turned them into a war. Her hands blistered, popped, bled. She wrapped them in rags and kept going. Because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant panic. Better to bleed. Day 1 ended with 6 bolts removed. Rebecca's arms shook so hard she couldn't hold a fork at dinner. She ate standing up in the kitchen. Peanut butter straight from the jar. Too tired to bother with bread. Day 2 she got the remaining bolts out. The cylinder sat loose now, connected only by the main shaft that ran through the bearings. Getting the shaft out required driving it through with a sledgehammer and a brass drift punch. Rebecca swung the hammer. The shaft didn't budge. She swung harder. The impact jarred her shoulders, made her teeth rattle. 47 swings. She counted every one. On the 48th swing the shaft finally moved. 1/4 inch. Then another 1/4. Then it started sliding, until it didn't. The bearing had seized around the shaft, welded itself on with friction and heat and corrosion. Rebecca needed a bearing puller. Didn't have one. Couldn't afford one. She had a card jack. 20-ton hydraulic bottle jack from the barn, used for changing tractor tires. Close enough. She positioned the jack between the cylinder and the bearing. Started pumping. The cylinder moved. The shaft didn't. Something had to give. Metal groaned. The sound a combine makes when it's about to break or be saved. No middle ground. The shaft popped free. Sudden. Rebecca fell backward. Landed hard on the steel platform. The breath knocked out of her lungs. She lay there. Stared at the shed's roof. Rust and cobwebs and sparrow nests in the rafters. 34 years old her father had been when he bought this combine new. Thought it would last 20 years. 30 if he took care of it. It had lasted 47. Would have lasted longer if Rebecca could keep it running. If she didn't kill herself trying. She sat up. Everything hurt. Her back, her shoulders, her hands. Even her jaw hurt from clenching her teeth. But the shaft was out, which meant she was winning. Day 3 she attached the chain hoist to the cylinder assembly. Started cranking. The chain went taut. The cylinder lifted, inch by inch. 340 pounds of steel and rasp bars and concave plates, the chain slipped. The cylinder dropped 6 inches, slammed against the housing. The sound was like a car crash in a metal box. Rebecca's heart hammered. The cylinder hung crooked. If the chain failed completely, it would fall, crush anything underneath. Anyone underneath. She adjusted, rehooked, started cracking again. By noon, the cylinder was out, hanging from the hoist, swaying slightly in the air that barely moved inside the shed. Rebecca stood under it, looking up. This thing could kill her. One failed link, one bent hook. That's all it would take. She guided it over to a workbench she'd reinforced with railroad ties, lowered it down. The bench groaned but held. The bearing was obvious now. Seized onto the shaft, black with carbon, rough with scoring where metal had ground against metal until both gave up. Getting it off required heat. Rebecca found Kenneth's acetylene torch, the one he'd used for cutting, for welding. For heating stuck bolts, she'd never used a torch before, had watched Kenneth use it 100 times. Watching wasn't the same as doing, but nothing about this summer was the same as anything. She lit the torch, adjusted the flame until it was blue and tight, focused the heat on the bearing. The metal glowed, red, then orange, then yellow. The bearing expanded, just enough. Rebecca grabbed the bearing puller she'd borrowed from Timothy Allen, the neighbor who'd helped her father back in 1974, who'd offered a grain truck, but nothing else, because everyone had their own problems. She fitted the puller around the bearing, tightened the center screw. The bearing fought. She tightened more. Something was going to break. The bearing, or the puller, or Rebecca's resolve. The bearing broke, came off in pieces, shattered from the stress. Good. She didn't need it intact. She needed it gone. Day 4 was driving to the parts store in Oklahoma City, 90 miles each way. Her truck's engine knocking. Oil consumption getting worse. The Massey Ferguson dealer sat in an industrial park. Corrugated metal building. Parking lot full of equipment. Inside smelled like grease and new tires. The parts counter was staffed by a man in his 60s. Name tag, said Earl. Hands that had turned wrenches for 40 years. Rebecca showed him the old bearing. Gave him the combine's serial number. Earl typed into his computer. Frowned. Type more. Discontinued part. No stock anywhere in the region. Rebecca's stomach dropped. What? These old 760s? Parts dried up years ago. Most folks either upgraded or they're running salvage. She stared at the bearing in her hands. Broken. Useless. Irreplaceable. Earl kept typing. Wait. Got a cross-reference here. Different part number. Same spec. Universal fit. We got one in the warehouse. Hope flickered. Dangerous. She didn't trust it. How much? $340. The exact amount she had left in her checking account. The last of her savings after buying gas and food and parts for the John Deere. Every dollar she had. Rebecca pulled out her checkbook. Wrote the check. Her hand shook. The numbers barely legible. Earl took it. Looked at her. Really looked. Saw something in her face that made his expression soften. You fixing this yourself? Yes. Cylinder bearing replacements, a 2-man job minimum. I don't have 2 men. Earl nodded slowly. Went to the back. Came back with the bearing in a box. Set it on the counter. Torque specs are critical. Too loose and it'll walk. Too tight and you'll crack the housing, I know. You got a dial indicator to check runout? No, you'll need one. Runout's gotta be under 5 thousandths or the cylinder won't balance. Earl disappeared again. Came back with a dial indicator in a plastic case. This is a loaner. Bring it back when you're done. Rebecca's throat tightened. Kindness was harder to take than contempt. Contempt she could fight. Kindness just made her want to cry. Thank you. Earl shrugged. Your daddy bought parts here for 30 years. Never missed a payment. That counts for something. The drive home felt longer. The new bearing sat in a box on the passenger seat. $340. $0 left in the bank. No safety net. No backup plan. Just faith that she could install this bearing correctly the first time, because there wouldn't be a second time. Days 5 through 11 were installation. Every step by the book. Every measurement checked twice. The bearing pressed onto the shaft with a hydraulic press she made from the car jack and steel plates. The dial indicator showed runout at 4 thousandths. Close enough. Had to be close enough. Rebecca reassembled the cylinder. Bolt by bolt. Every torque spec exact. The manual said 90 foot-pounds on the main bolts. She set the torque wrench, clicked it when it hit 90. Not 91, not 89. 90-day 12, she was ready to test. The sun was setting. Orange light through the shed's open doors. Rebecca stood in front of the combine, her reflection visible in the paint. Thin, haunted. Hands wrapped in bandages, she climbed into the cab, turned the key. The diesel engine caught. The combine shook, vibration traveling through the frame. Rebecca engaged the cylinder, the lever that made the thresher spin. The moment of truth, the cylinder turned, slow at first, then faster, the rasp bars blurring. 800 RPM. The sound clean, no grinding, no wobble. She let it run for 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. No problems, no failures. Just a machine doing what machines were supposed to do. Rebecca shut it down. The silence after felt absolute. She climbed out of the cab, sat on the shed floor, back against the tire of the combine. Too tired to walk to the house. Too tired to feel anything except emptiness. She'd saved the combine. Spent 12 days and $340, and every ounce of strength she had. And now the harvest could begin. Except she still had to bring it in. 800 acres. Alone. Because hiring help required money she didn't have. Required people who believed she could do this. Required a world that didn't look at a 26-year-old woman and see failure waiting to happen. Rebecca closed her eyes. Just for a minute, just to rest. She woke up 3 hours later, stiff, cold despite the summer heat. The shed was dark, the farm silent. She walked to the house, made herself eat, showered, fell into bed. Tomorrow the wheat harvest would start. Tomorrow would be the hardest thing she'd ever done. August came with heat that made July look gentle. 105 degrees by noon, 108 by 3. The kind of heat that killed cattle and made asphalt soft. The wheat field stood ready. 800 acres of gold, kernels at 13% moisture. Perfect for cutting. Another week and they'd start shattering, dropping grain on the ground. Money lost to timing. Rebecca stood at the field's edge. The combine sat behind her, fueled, greased, ready. She'd spent the last week trying to hire help. Called every number in her father's address book. Asked everyone at the co-op. Put a notice on the bulletin board at the feed store. No one wanted to work for her. No one believed the farm would make it. No one wanted to be part of a failure. Timothy Allen had stopped by 2 days ago. His truck pulling a grain trailer. His voice was gruff. "You can borrow this. Haul your wheat to the elevator when you're ready." Rebecca's throat tightened. "Timothy, I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. Your daddy helped me when I needed it. This is me returning the favor. I don't know how I'll manage alone." Timothy looked at the wheat fields. Then at her. Something shifted in his expression. "Your daddy harvested alone for years before he could afford help. You're Kenneth Clark's daughter. You'll figure it out." Then he'd driven away. Left her with a borrowed grain trailer and no excuses left, so. Here she was, standing at the edge of 800 acres with a combine she'd rebuilt and a prayer she didn't quite believe in. Rebecca climbed into the cab, started the engine, lowered the header. The sickle bar began cutting. Back and forth, slicing through wheat stalks. She engaged the forward drive. The combine moved into the field, wheat feeding into the header, up the conveyor, into the threshing cylinder, the grain separating from the chaff. It worked. Everything worked. The repairs held. The machine did its job. Rebecca drove, up one row, down the next, the cab filling with dust and chaff. The heat building until the thermometer on the dash read 115. No air conditioning, just a fan that moved hot air around. Sweat soaking through her shirt, running into her eyes, burning 6 in the morning until 10 at night. 16 hours in the cab. 20-minute breaks to refuel, to drink water, to eat something that didn't require sitting down because sitting anywhere except the combine meant wasting time. Day 1 she cut 40 acres. Day 2 another 40. The rhythm brutal, the heat crushing, her body adapting or dying, no middle ground. Day 7 the belt that drove the cleaning fan snapped. The combine choked, wheat backing up into the cylinder. The whole system jamming. Rebecca shut it down. Climbed out. The belt had shredded, pieces hanging like torn skin. She didn't have a spare. Hadn't thought to buy one. Stupid. Kenneth would have had 3 spares. The nearest parts store was in Weatherford. 30 miles. An hour lost driving. An hour back. Plus however long to find the belt, or she could fix it. Rebecca looked at the destroyed belt. Then at the belts driving other systems on the combine. The grain tank unloader belt was the same width. Different length but same width. She could cannibalize it. Use it for the cleaning fan. Unload grain manually. Slower but possible. She found Kenneth's tools in the storage box on the combine. Got to work. 2 hours under the Oklahoma sun, metal hot enough to brand, her hands blistering through the gloves, but the belt fit. The cleaning fan ran. The combine worked again. She climbed back into the cab, started cutting. 3 hours lost. 3 hours that meant working past midnight to make up the time. So she worked past midnight. Day 9 brought rain. Not forecast, not expected. Just clouds rolling in from the west and opening up. 20 acres of cut wheat sitting in the field waiting to be combined. 20 acres soaked, grain swelling. Moisture content jumping from 13% to 20%. Too wet to sell. Too wet to store. Ruined. Rebecca sat in the combine's cab watching rain hammer the windshield. Watching money dissolve. Watching failure come in drops. The rain lasted 6 hours. When it stopped, the sun came out. Steam rose from the fields. The air thick enough to swim through. She had to wait 2 days for the wheat to dry. 2 days of lost time. 2 days closer to the deadline. When she started cutting again, the ruined wheat went into a separate pile. Would have to be dried. Would cost extra. Would eat into profits that were already thin. Day 14, she started hallucinating. Seeing things that weren't there. Her father standing at the field's edge. Christopher's truck pulling into the driveway. The bank foreclosure notice tacked to the door. None of it real. All of it exhaustion. The brain shutting down from heat and stress and sleep deprivation. She'd lost 15 pounds. Could count her ribs. Her hands were scarred, permanently damaged. The blisters had turned to calluses that cracked and bled and reformed harder. Day 18, she nearly fainted. Vision going grey. The combine drifting off course. She caught herself, stopped. Drank a gallon of water from the jug she kept in the cab. Her pee was dark. Nearly brown, dehydration, kidney stress. Her body cannibalizing itself. She should stop. Should rest. Should take a day off. But resting meant not cutting. Not cutting meant not harvesting. Not harvesting meant no money. No money meant default, so she kept going. Day 21. The final acre. Rebecca drove the combine up the last row. Wheat feeding through. Grain pouring into the tank. The end of the field approaching, she shut down the header. Killed the engine. Climbed out. Silence. Absolute. The kind that comes after noise so constant you forget what quiet sounds like. 800 acres. Actually 780 after losing 20 to the rain, 21 days. 336 hours in the combine cab ton. Rebecca stood in the stubble field. Too tired to feel triumph, too empty to feel anything. She'd done it. Alone, without help. Without anyone believing she could. The grain sat in piles around the field. Had to be loaded into the trailer, hauled to the elevator in Weatherford. Sold. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight she just wanted to sleep. She drove the combine back to the shed. Shut everything down. Walked to the house on legs that barely worked. Fell into bed without showering, without eating. Without anything except unconsciousness that came like mercy. 24,000 bushels of wheat. The elevator scales confirmed it. Moisture content averaged 13.2%. Good. Grade 2, hard red winter. Market price, $3.75 per bushel. Math. Rebecca did the math in her head while waiting for the check. 24,000 times 375. $90,000 gross minus. Minus fuel. $1,200. Minus the parts for the combine. $340. Minus the O-rings for the tractor. $129. Minus the lost 20 acres. $7,500 she'd never see. Net profit. $78,831. The elevator manager handed her the check. She stared at the numbers. More money than she'd ever held, enough to pay the bank. Enough to survive winter. Enough to prove everyone wrong. Rebecca drove to First County Bank. September 10th. 5 days early. 5 days ahead of the deadline. Jonathan Harris looked up when she walked into his office. Surprise crossing his face. Then something else. Concern, maybe. Or calculation. She didn't sit. Just pulled the check from her pocket. Set it on his desk. $18,000. The loan payment. Harris picked up the check. Studied it. Looked at her. Where did you get this? Rebecca's jaw tightened. I harvested the wheat. You? Alone? Yes. Harris set the check down. Opened his desk drawer. Pulled out a folder. Rebecca's loan file. There's been an adjustment to the loan terms. Something cold slid down her spine. What? Harris pulled out a form. Official bank letterhead. Dated August 30th. 11 days ago, due to change in borrower's marital status, the loan has been reassessed. New payment amount is $22,500. The room tilted. Rebecca grabbed the edge of the desk. That's not legal. Harris's voice went flat. Clause 14B. Change in employment or marital status allows the bank to reassess risk and adjust terms accordingly. I never agreed to this. You agreed when you signed the original loan. Your father signed it. The clause is binding. Rebecca's hands shook. She looked at the check. $78,831. Could cover the inflated payment, could still survive. But this was theft. Legal theft. Banking theft. The kind that destroyed people and called it business. Her voice came out hoarse. Why? Harris didn't answer. Didn't need to. They both knew, because she was a woman alone. Because the bank wanted her to fail. Because Consolidated Ag Partners was still buying land. And a foreclosed farm was easier to acquire than a successful one. Rebecca pulled out her checkbook. Wrote a check for $22,500. Her hand steadied despite the rage making her vision blur. She tore it out. Slapped it on the desk. The loan is paid. In full. On time, Harris took the check. Stamped it received. Filed the paperwork. The loan is satisfied for this year. Next year's payment is due September 15th. Same terms apply. Rebecca turned, walked out. Through the bank. Past the Alehillas. Out into the heat. Into her truck. She sat there, hands on the steering wheel. The rage and helplessness and fury all mixing into something that felt like choking. She'd done everything right. Fixed the machines. Brought in the harvest. Made the payment. And they'd changed the rules anyway, because they could. Because no one stopped them. Because women alone didn't have power, unless they took it. Rebecca started the truck. Drove home. The check for $56,331 sat in her pocket. Less than she'd expected. Less than she'd earned, but still enough. Barely, to make it through winter, to plant next year. To survive, which was all she needed for now. Winter came hard. December brought ice. January brought snow. February brought a cold that made the farmhouse groan. The third tractor still sat broken. The Ford 8M. Electrical system dead. No money to fix it yet. Had to wait. Had to save. Rebecca worked at the library. 20 hours a week. Minimum wage. Every dollar going into the bank account that held $56,000 she couldn't touch except for emergencies. Because next year's seed would cost money. Next year's fuel. Next year's parts when machines broke because machines always broke. The ice storm hit February 12th. Came in the night. Temperature dropping from 40 degrees to 15 in 2 hours. Rain turning to sleet. Sleet coating everything in 2 inches of clear ice. Power went out. The lines weighed down. Poles snapping. Transformers exploding like gunfire. 6 days without electricity. No heat except the wood stove. No water because the well pump ran on electric. No phone. No contact with anything. Rebecca melted snow for drinking water. Burned furniture for heat when the firewood ran out. Slept in the living room wearing every piece of clothing she owned. Day 4 the pipes froze. Day 5 one burst. In the kitchen. Water flooding before she found the shut-off valve. She sat at the kitchen table. Water pooling around her boots. The house at 40 degrees inside. Her breath visible. Everything was too much. The cold. The broken pipe. The broken tractor. The farm pressing down like a weight designed to crush her. Christopher had been right. Her father's dream was dying. Taking her with it. Rebecca pulled the phone toward her. Dead. No dial tone. But she'd memorized the number. Consolidated Ag Partners. The corporate buyers. The easy way out. When the power came back, she'd call. Set up a meeting. Sell. Walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere warm. Somewhere easier. Somewhere that wasn't here. That night she went to the workshop. Cold enough to see her breath. The John Deere sat silent. The combine hulked in the shadows. Rebecca opened Kenneth's toolbox, just to touch something he'd touched. Just to feel less alone. In the top tray of sockets she found an envelope. White. Her name written on the front in her father's blocky handwriting. She opened it. $3,200 in cash. 20s and 50s and hundreds. More money than Kenneth had ever carried at once. And a note. Written on lined paper torn from his spiral notebook, for the third machine. I knew you'd need this right when you wanted to quit. Don't. The land doesn't need you to be strong. Just patient. Just faithful. Dad. Rebecca held the money. Held the note. Sat on the cold concrete floor and cried. Not from sadness, from something else. Relief maybe. Or recognition. Kenneth had known. Had known she'd get this far. Had known it would be hard. Had known exactly when she'd need help, and he'd left it for her. hidden where she'd find it at exactly the right moment. Rebecca put the money in her pocket, folded the note carefully, put it back in the envelope. She wasn't selling, wasn't quitting, wasn't giving up. Not today. Not because of frozen pipes and ice storms and loneliness. She went back to the house, found the main water shut off, got tools, started fixing the burst pipe. March came wet, rain and mud, the kind of spring that promised good planting weather. Rebecca took Kenneth's $3,200 to the parts store, bought a magneto for the Ford 8N, $90 after tax, bought a wiring harness, $95, bought spark plugs and points and a condenser, $22 more, spent 6 days rewiring the entire electrical system, following Kenneth's notebook, following diagrams in the service manual that were older than she was. Electrical was hard, harder than hydraulics, harder than bearings, because you couldn't see electricity, couldn't touch it, could only trace wires and test circuits and hope you'd connected everything right. Day 6, Rebecca turned the key. The Ford's engine turned over, coughed, caught, sputtered, smoothed out, running. After 8 months dead, after everyone saying it was scrap, after Rebecca herself had almost believed it, but here it was, running. The oldest tractor on the farm, the first one Kenneth had bought, still working, still useful. 3 machines, 3 battles, 3 victories. Rebecca stood in the workshop, the Ford idling, the sound familiar, comforting, the sound of her childhood, of her father, of everything worth saving. She shut off the engine. The silence after felt different now. Not empty, just quiet. The farm was hers, completely. All 1,200 acres paid for with sweat and blood and refusal to quit. And tomorrow she'd start getting ready for spring planting, because the land was patient, and so was she. Spring 1980 came with promise. Rain at the right times, soil warm enough to plant. The kind of season that made farmers believe in second chances. Rebecca planted 500 acres of wheat, 200 of soybeans, left the rest in pasture, conservative, careful. The way Kenneth had always done it. Her neighbors were doing the opposite. At the co-op she heard the talk. Expansion, leverage, new equipment financed at rates that seemed reasonable until you read the fine print. The gospel according to the agricultural journals was simple. Get big or get out. Farm bigger, borrow bigger, bet everything on commodity prices staying high. Russia was buying American grain. Prices were good. The government was encouraging fence row to fence row planting. Banks were practically giving money away, and farmers were listening. Timothy Allen stopped by one afternoon, his truck pulling a brand new 40-foot grain trailer. His voice had an edge Rebecca hadn't heard before. Financed it, 12% interest. Figure I can pay it off in 3 years if prices hold. Rebecca didn't say anything. What could she say? That 12% was high. That betting on prices was gambling. That debt was a cage you couldn't see until it closed. Timothy wouldn't have listened. No one listened. They were all too busy believing the boom would last forever. It didn't. October 1979. Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker decided inflation was the enemy. Interest rates started climbing. 9%, then 11, then 13. By June 1980, the prime rate hit 15%. Farmers who'd borrowed at 9% suddenly owed 15%. Loan payments doubling, tripling. Monthly bills that had been manageable becoming impossible. And the grain embargo hit. President Carter punishing the Soviet Union for invading Afghanistan. Wheat exports dropped. Corn exports collapsed. Commodity prices fell off a cliff. The perfect storm. High debt, high interest, low prices. Farmers started dying, not physically, though some did. Suicides in the barn, rifles in the mouth, pills in the bottle. But mostly they died financially. Slowly, publicly. Foreclosure auctions advertised in the newspaper. Equipment sold to the highest bidder. Land seized by banks that had encouraged the borrowing in the first place. Rebecca watched it happen. House by house, farm by farm, family by family. Section 3. The Wilson place went first. Jake Wilson, who'd wanted to buy her land back when Christopher left. He'd borrowed $200,000 to buy a new tractor, new planter, new combine, all financed at rates that reset every year. When the rates hit 18%, Jake couldn't make the payments. Tried to sell equipment, couldn't find buyers. Everyone was selling. No one was buying. The bank foreclosed June 1981. Auction held on a Tuesday. Rebecca didn't go. Heard about it at the co-op. Jake's equipment sold for 30 cents on the dollar. The land went to a corporate buyer. Jake moved to Tulsa. Got a job in a factory. Last Rebecca heard, he was divorced, drinking, broken. Morrison family went next. August 1981. Different story. Same ending. They'd borrowed to expand. Bought the neighbor's land. 600 acres at inflated prices, financed with variable rate loans. When grain prices dropped, they couldn't cover the payment. The bank called the loan. Demanded full payment immediate. The Morrisons didn't have it. No one had that kind of cash. The bank knew it, didn't care. Foreclosure. Auction. Gone. Cooper family. February 1982. Bankruptcy. Chapter 7. Everything liquidated. 50 years of farming erased in an afternoon. Rebecca knew these people. Had gone to school with their kids. Had bought eggs from Mrs. Morrison. Had borrowed tools from Jake Wilson before he'd become bitter. Now they were gone. Houses empty. Fields taken over by corporate operations. Family names disappearing from mailboxes. The county had 147 working farms in 1979. By 1982, it had 89. 58 families destroyed. 58 legacies ended, and Rebecca stood. Alone, solvent, surviving. Not because she was smarter. Not because she was luckier. Because she didn't owe anyone anything. Zell debt. That was the difference. That was everything. Her 1981 harvest brought in $52,000. Lower prices. Same costs. Smaller profit. But profit nonetheless. She paid her bills. Saved the rest. Planted again in fall. The 1982 harvest was worse. Grain prices hit bottom. Wheat selling for $2.90 per bushel. Barely above the cost of production. Rebecca netted $38,000. Enough to survive. Not enough to get ahead. But surviving was winning when everyone else was losing. The townspeople started looking at her differently. Not with pity anymore. With something else. Respect. Confusion. Suspicion. How was she making it when no one else could? The answer was simple. She lived lean. Relied on knowledge instead of credit. Fixed what broke instead of replacing it. Farmed the way Kenneth had taught her. The way everyone used to farm, before the banks convinced them bigger was better. But simple answers weren't satisfying. People wanted secrets. Wanted tricks. Wanted something they could replicate without changing how they thought. Rebecca didn't have tricks. Just patience. Just faith in what her father had known. That the land doesn't care about leverage, only care. May 1982 brought unexpected visitors. Jonathan Harris's Cadillac pulled into the farmyard. Dust rising behind it. The banker who'd tried to foreclose, who'd modified her loan, who'd represented everything wrong with the system. Rebecca was in the garden, planting tomatoes, her hands dirty, hair tied back, old shirt with holes at the elbows. Harris got out of the car. 60 years old now, silver hair thinner, face lined with stress. He'd aged a decade in 3 years. Rebecca stood, wiped her hands on her jeans, waited. Harris walked over, stopped 10 feet away, like he was approaching something dangerous. His voice came out rough. "Rebecca, Mr. Harris, I came to talk. If you'll listen." Rebecca didn't move, didn't invite him closer, just waited. Harris looked around. At the farmhouse with its fresh paint. At the equipment shed where the tractors sat maintained and functional. At the fields greening up with new wheat. Everything thriving, everything working. Everything impossible according to the rules he'd believed in. "I heard you paid off the loan early." His words came slowly. Like they hurt, brought it current in April. 6 months ahead. "Yes." "How?" Rebecca's jaw tightened. "Same way I've been doing it. Good harvest. Low costs, no debt." Harris nodded, looked at the ground. When he spoke again, his voice was different. "Smaller. I was forced into early retirement last month. The State Banking Commission opened an investigation. Found irregularities. 12 loans, including yours, that I'd modified without proper authorization." Something cold moved through Rebecca's chest. Vindication. But it felt hollow. They're reviewing everything. My whole career. 40 years of banking. Ended because I thought I knew better than the farmers I was supposed to serve. Harris looked up. Met her eyes. His face was naked. "Ashamed. I came to tell you I'm sorry. For the modified loan. For trying to pressure you into selling. For not believing you could do this." The apology hung between them. Real. Painful. Too late to change anything, but maybe not too late to matter. Rebecca's voice came out steady. "Why did you do it?" "I believed the experts, the agricultural economists, the government programs. They all said the same thing. Get big or get out. Consolidate. Leverage. Modernize." Harris gestured at nothing. "At everything, your father." Kenneth, he represented the old way. Small operations, no debt, self-reliance. I thought it was nostalgia, sentiment. Refusing to adapt, you thought he was a fool. Yes, Harris's voice cracked. I thought he was a fool. And I was wrong. Completely. Catastrophically wrong. Silence. A crow called from the fence line. Wind moved through the wheat. Harris pulled an envelope from his pocket. Held it out. This is the overpayment. From when I modified your loan. $4,500 plus interest. You're entitled to it. Rebecca took the envelope. Didn't open it. Just held it. The farmers I pushed into debt. They're gone now. The Wilsons. The Morrisons. The Coopers. 58 families in this county alone. I helped destroy them. Told them debt was leverage. That bigger was better. That they couldn't compete staying small. Harris's hands shook. He shoved them in his pockets. You survived. Not despite staying small. Because of it. Your wheat looks better than anyone's in the county. Your equipment runs. Your farm is paid for. He paused. Something breaking in his expression. How did you know? How did you know when everyone else was wrong? Rebecca looked at the fields. At the land her grandfather had bought. Her father had maintained. That she'd nearly lost. I didn't know. I just listened to my father. To the land. Dad taught me that farming isn't about conquering the earth. It's about partnering with it. That debt isn't leverage. It's a cage, that the land rewards patience. Not gambling. Harris absorbed this. Nodded slowly. Your father was the wisest man in this county, and I was too arrogant to see it. He extended his hand. Trembling, old, Rebecca looked at it. At the man who'd tried to take her farm, who'd changed the rules, who'd represented everything wrong with the system. And she took it, shook it, firm. Final. I'm sorry. Harris's voice barely above a whisper. For everything, I know. He got back in his Cadillac, drove away, dust settling behind him like a curtain closing. Rebecca stood holding the envelope. $4,500 she hadn't expected. Money that changed nothing. An apology that changed everything. Because vindication without cruelty felt like freedom. August 1982 brought heat. The kind that made asphalt shimmer. That killed grass. That tested everything alive. Rebecca was in the workshop. Changing oil in the John Deere. Maintenance that couldn't wait. Work that never stopped. She heard the truck before she saw it. Old Ford. Engine knocking. Same blue haze of burning oil her own truck made. The sound familiar in a way that made her stomach clench. Christopher. 3 years. 3 years since he'd driven away. 3 years of silence. 3 years of Rebecca building a life that didn't include him. And now his truck was pulling into her farmyard. Stopping by the house. Door opening. Rebecca wiped her hands. Walked to the workshop entrance. Stayed in the shadows where she could see without being seen. Christopher got out. Thinner. 20 pounds lighter easy. His face weathered. Lined. The cockiness gone. Replaced with something that looked like defeat. He stood by his truck, looking at the farm. At the house with its new roof. At the equipment shed. At the fields thick with wheat ready for harvest. Everything he'd left behind. Everything he'd said was dying. Still here. Still thriving. Still working. Rebecca stepped out into the sun. Christopher turned. Saw her. Something crossed his face. Pain. Recognition. Shame. They stood 30 feet apart. The distance feeling infinite. Christopher's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Finally words came out hoarse. I heard in town, you kept it. Rebecca didn't answer. What was there to say? Yes, she'd kept it. Obviously. He had eyes. They said you're the only one left standing. Everyone else. Wilson, Morrison, Cooper. All gone. But you survived, I did. Christopher looked at his boots. Back at her. His hands shaking slightly, the oil fields. The boom everyone was chasing, it ended. Federal interest rates killed it. Jobs disappeared. I was laid off 18 months ago. Been working odd jobs since. Barely making rent. Rebecca's throat tight. Not from sympathy. From something else. The realization that she'd stopped caring. That his suffering meant nothing to her. Not because she was cruel. Because she'd moved past it. Past him, Christopher took a step forward. Stopped. His voice breaking. I was a fool, Rebecca. A goddamn fool. The profanity hung in the air. Christopher never swore. Never got emotional. Always stayed controlled. Not anymore. I thought your father was backwards. Thought this farm was a trap. A millstone. I wanted the easy money. The city job. The modern life. He gestured at nothing. Everything. But it was never the farm. Never your father. It was me. My pride. My fear. My absolute arrogance thinking I knew better. Christopher's eyes were wet. Tears he wasn't bothering to hide. I left you with debt. Broken equipment. An impossible situation. I told myself I was being realistic. That you'd fail. That selling was the only option. Pause. Breathing hard, but you didn't fail. You fixed the machines, brought in the harvest, paid the loan, survived the crisis that killed everyone else. You did everything I said was impossible. Rebecca stood silent, letting him finish, letting him purge whatever he'd come here to say. I'm sorry. For leaving, for not believing in you, for being too weak to stay when things got hard. The words settled, final, complete. Makes you wonder how often we run from the very thing that could save us. Rebecca thought it but didn't say it, didn't need to. Christopher already knew. Her voice came out calm. I forgave you when you left. Had to move forward, to not let bitterness poison everything I was trying to build. Christopher's face crumpled. Relief, grief, gratitude, are you? Can we? He couldn't finish, couldn't ask. Rebecca shook her head, gentle, firm. No, that part's over. Was over the day you drove away. Christopher nodded, accepting, understanding. He turned back to his truck, stopped, looked at her one more time. You're stronger than I ever was. No, just more patient. He got in his truck, started the engine, backed out, drove down the long driveway, dust rising, settling, gone. Rebecca watched until the truck disappeared, felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, no regret, just peace. The kind that comes from proving yourself to yourself, from needing no one's validation. She went back to the workshop, finished changing the oil, checked the filters, greased the fittings. Work, endless, necessary, hers. The years rolled forward, 1983, 1984, 1985, each harvest different, each season its own challenge. Drought one year, too much rain the next, prices up, prices down. The rhythms of farming that never changed no matter how much technology advanced. More neighbors failed. Smaller operations bought by corporate farms. The landscape shifting, consolidating. Exactly what the experts had predicted. Except Rebecca didn't consolidate, didn't expand, stayed at 1,200 acres. The same size Kenneth had maintained for 40 years. People started calling her. Young farmers, kids fresh out of agricultural college, with heads full of data and technology. Asking questions, seeking advice. Why were her fields greener? Why were her yields consistent? Why wasn't she drowning in debt like their parents? Rebecca told them the truth. Crop rotation, cover crops in winter, no-till practices that preserved soil structure, minimal chemical inputs, letting the land rest, old-fashioned methods, proven methods, things their grandparents had known before the chemical companies convinced everyone there was a better way. She taught them to read soil, to test tilth by hand, to smell earth and know if it was living or dead. The Agricultural Extension Office in Weatherford invited her to speak. November 1984, a workshop on sustainable farming practices. Rebecca stood in front of 30 farmers, men mostly, older, skeptical, her voice steady. My father told me farming isn't mining. You can't extract without replenishing. You can't force production year after year without consequences. She showed them Kenneth's journal. 60 years of records, soil tests, yield data, input costs, everything documented. This is proof. Real data, not theories, not corporate promises, actual results from actual farming. Someone in the back called out, "Your operation's too small to prove anything. Try doing that at 2,000 acres. Rebecca didn't flinch. I'm not trying to feed the world. I'm trying to keep my land alive for the next generation. Big operations can't do that. Can't maintain soil health at scale. Can't avoid the chemical treadmill. Can't survive when commodity prices crash. Silence. Uncomfortable. True, another farmer. Younger. Less defensive. How do you make money staying small? I don't chase money. I chase sustainability. Low costs. No debt. That's how I survived the 80s when everyone else failed. The room shifted. Recognition. Respect. Understanding. After the workshop, 3 young farmers stayed. Wanted to visit her farm. See the practices in action. Learn what colleges weren't teaching. Rebecca said yes. Started having visitors 1 Saturday a month. Teaching. Sharing. Passing on what Kenneth had taught her. Not for money. For legacy. Because knowledge died with people unless it was given away. She wasn't rich. Never would be. Her annual income averaged $40,000. Some years less. Some years more. But she was free. Completely. No bank owned her land. No debt controlled her decisions. No one had power over her future except her. That was worth more than any amount of money. The calendar flipped. 1990. 1995. 2000. 2005. Rebecca's hair went from blonde to gray. Her hands became more gnarled. Her back ached more in the mornings. But the farm kept producing. The land kept giving. The machines kept running. The John Deere 4430 was 42 years old, still plowing, still planting, still working. The Massey Ferguson 760 was 36 years old, still harvesting, still threshing, still functional. The Ford 8N was 57 years old, still hauling, still useful, still running, because Rebecca maintained them, because she listened when they made unfamiliar noises, because she fixed problems before they became catastrophes, the way Kenneth had taught her. Spring 2009 brought a visitor, Rebecca's nephew, Brandon Clark, 21 years old. Her brother's youngest son, tall, lean, serious eyes. He showed up on a Saturday morning. Drove a beat-up Honda with Oklahoma plates. Got out looking uncertain. Rebecca was in the garden. 60 years old now, silver hair, face lined from sun, hands permanently scarred from decades of mechanical work. She straightened, pressed her hand to her lower back, smiled. Brandon, Aunt Rebecca, his voice awkward. They'd seen each other at family gatherings, Christmas, Thanksgiving, but never one-on-one. Never like this. Dad said I should come talk to you. About farming, about maybe, I don't know. Learning. Rebecca studied him, saw something of her brother, something of herself, something of Kenneth. You want to farm? I dropped out of college, business degree, hated it. Felt like I was training to do something that didn't matter. Brandon looked at the land, at the wheat fields, at the farmhouse that had stood for 80 years. I want to do something real, something that lasts. Rebecca gestured toward the workshop. Come with me. They walked across the yard, into the building that smelled like grease and diesel and history. The 3 tractors sat in their places. The John Deere, the Massey Ferguson, the Ford. Familiar as family, older than most families lasted. Brandon's eyes widened. These still run? Everyone. The Deere's 47 years old, Ferguson's 41, Ford's 57. That's impossible, Rebecca smiled. Impossible if you replace instead of repair. Possible if you maintain, if you listen, if you care. She opened Kenneth's toolbox, pulled out the spiral notebook. Pages soft as cloth now, stained, warped, precious. This is your great-grandfather's journal. Started in 1949, I've added to it. 60 years of every repair, every part replaced. Every lesson learned. Brandon took it carefully, opened it, saw the handwriting. Kenneth's blocky script, Rebecca's neater hand. 60 years of mechanical memory. This is incredible. This is your inheritance, if you want it. Brandon looked up, confused. Rebecca's voice went soft. The land's worth $4 million now, debt-free. I could sell it tomorrow. Live comfortably for the rest of my life. Pause. But that's not what this farm is about. It's not about the money. It's about the knowledge, the stewardship, the belief that we don't own the land. We just borrow it from the next generation. She gestured at the tractors, at the journal, at everything. Most people inherit wealth. I'm offering you something different. Knowledge, skills, a way of life that values patience over profit, sustainability over scale. Brandon's throat worked. Trying to find words, Rebecca pulled a wrench from the toolbox, handed it to him. The land doesn't need strength, it needs patience. The machines don't need money, they need understanding. And life doesn't need luck, it needs faith in what you know. Brandon held the wrench, the weight of it. The meaning, I don't know anything, yet. You don't know anything yet, but you can learn. That's what this place teaches. That knowledge matters more than capital. That patience beats leverage. That choosing the harder path sometimes leads to the better destination. They stood in the workshop, surrounded by tools, by machines, by the accumulated wisdom of 3 generations. Brandon's voice came out determined. Teach me. Rebecca smiled. Get here at 6 tomorrow morning. Wear clothes you don't mind destroying. They walked outside. The sun was setting. Orange light across 1,200 acres. Wheat growing, soil alive. Land that had survived depressions and droughts and disasters. Land that would survive beyond them too. Brandon looked at the fields, at the farmhouse, at his aunt who'd become a legend in the county. The woman who wouldn't break, his voice quiet. Why didn't you ever expand? Buy more land when you could. Rebecca considered. Choosing words carefully, everyone thought big was better. More acres, more equipment, more debt. They called it progress, called it modern farming. She gestured at the neighboring farms. Corporate-owned now, massive operations, efficient, profitable, soulless. But big isn't always better. Sustainable is better. Debt-free is better. Being able to sleep at night is better. Knowing you can survive bad years because you're not leveraged to the hilt. That's better. Brandon nodded slowly. Understanding, or starting to. I chose freedom over wealth. Chose control over scale. Chose to farm the way that felt right, instead of the way everyone said I should. Rebecca looked at him directly. You'll face that choice too. Everyone does. The easy path or the right one. The path everyone's taking, or the path that leads where you actually want to go. Silence. Crickets starting their evening song. The sky going purple. Have you ever chosen the harder path because you knew it was the right one? Brandon seemed to hear the unspoken question. His face serious, committed. I want to learn everything. However long it takes, Rebecca smiled. Tired, satisfied, peaceful. Then let's get started. They stood together as night fell. Aunt and nephew, teacher and student. One generation passing the torch to the next. In the workshop, the 3 tractors sat waiting. The John Deere 4430 that had nearly defeated her. The Massey Ferguson 760 that had almost broken her body. The Ford 8N that had tested her faith. All 3 still running. Still useful. Still teaching lessons about patience and knowledge. And refusing to quit. The land stretched out in every direction. 1,200 acres that 3 generations had tended. That had tested them. Challenged them. Sustained them. And now a 4th generation was stepping forward. Taking the wrench. Accepting the responsibility. Rebecca looked at the sunset. At the wheat fields. At the nephew, who reminded her of herself 30 years ago. Uncertain. Determined. Ready. The machines would test him. The land would challenge him. The world would tell him he was doing it wrong. But he'd have the journal. Have the tools. Have the knowledge accumulated over 60 years. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Because it had been enough for her. The land remembered patience. The machines remembered care. And Rebecca remembered every lesson her father had taught her. Now it was time to pass those lessons on. The circle completing. The legacy continuing. The work that never ended but always mattered. Rebecca put her hand on Brandon's shoulder. Felt the future in the gesture. 6 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late, Brandon grinned. Yes, ma'am. They walked back to the house. The workshop behind them. The tractors waiting in the darkness. Ready for another day. Another season. Another generation. Ready to teach the lessons only machines and land and time could teach. That knowledge outlasts money. That patience defeats leverage. That the hardest path often leads home.